The swamp is literally winning right now. The only thing the Republicans and Democrats, unfortunately, can really agree on at this point is, foreign policy intervention, promoting the American empire with war and bombs and things like that.
Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. Very glad to have you back. I'm also very glad to have back on the line our friend Jason Burack from WallStForMainST. And Jason's going to help us with some Donald Trump analysis. Is he a neocon? Is he a Zionist? Is he a traitor? What's going on here? We have people like Jeff Berwick and Richie from Boston saying, I told you so. You were duped. And Jason, maybe we were. I mean, just look what's going on in Syria. Look what's going on with the deep state attacks. In fact, you emailed me that you said, he's being sabotaged by the deep state. There's leaks by almost everyone around him. The swamp isn't just fighting back. Unfortunately, it's winning. Jason, how are you?
I'm good, Sean. Thanks for having me back on. Yeah, I think it's a little too early to tell if he's a full neocon. This may have been something where he agreed to go along with it because, before Syria, the Syria strikes, they were nonstop with the globalist deep state and the mainstream media, and the Democrats were nonstop with this. Trump is a Russian spy. Trump, people in the Trump administration were, committing all these crimes with talking with Russian diplomats. Then we had the Susan Rice things come out. But the bottom line, as you talked about in the email I sent you, is, I live, as many of your listeners know, I live right outside of D.C., 20 minutes outside of Washington, D.C. The people around here in the Washington, D.C. metro area, most Republicans even hate Trump. So basically, if you're out in public, you cannot say, if you're at a restaurant, you cannot say anything nice about Trump. If anyone overhears you, you risk people coming over to your table, dumping drinks on you, yelling and screaming, calling you names. You really have to talk with a whisper. Be very, very careful what you say in public. If it's anything about Trump, if you like anything he does, all the conversations I overhear from people is nothing but negative stuff about Trump. It's really funny, though, Sean, how the people that have been in control in D.C., these parasites, these bureaucrats and globalists, for many, many years, that they've labeled themselves the resistance now. After years and years of control, whether you're neocon, regular rhino Republicans with your globalist agenda, or you're hardcore Democrats and you hate capitalism and you're still a globalist as well, they've been in control, these guys, for a very, very long time, and yet now a lot of them are labeling themselves the resistance. It's just a total joke. I guess a lot of Americans who haven't woken up will still believe this brainwashing. But let me tell you what I think is going on. So these leaks and sabotages have made it very difficult for Trump to get really much of anything done domestically in a short amount of time. Even with executive orders, it's becoming very, very difficult. Anything he needs Congress's help on, there's Republicans who want to block him, who hate him, who want him gone. The neocons and regular rhino Republicans, they hate him. Democrats, of course, hate him and are blocking him. The majority of bureaucracy here in Washington, D.C., more than 75% of it, is hardcore Democrat. A lot of them hate capitalism. You see them running around, expensive neighborhoods with Che Guevara T-shirts, wearing all the most expensive tech gear, driving BMWs, total hypocrite type of people. The bottom line, though, is that Trump's administration, Sean, and it's only been almost 3 months now, may unknowingly be the most, transparent presidential administration in history, because you have bureaucrats who are, like I said, mostly hardcore Democrat. They are willing to risk going to prison to leak top secret and classified material. So I think that's one of the reasons why Trump is going to Mar-a-Lago so much down in Florida, is to try to reduce the leaks from, all the career White House staffers and the other people. Any types of documents or conversations that people overheard, it has the potential to be leaked, within 24 hours or less sometimes, to the hardcore globalist and mostly Democrat mainstream media. So, that's why Trump has been going down to Mar-a-Lago. He's been trying to, I think one of the main reasons, besides the fact, he likes Florida, is to try to reduce the leaks and the sabotage. But literally the sabotage, Sean, is all around him, whether it's Ivanka Trump's husband, Jared Kushner, who is a hardcore Democrat. He's been meeting with tons and tons of Goldman Sachs bankers, added them into the administration. He's been wined and dined with Ivanka as well by, the richest global elites in the technology field at Facebook and Google, people like Eric Schmidt who are sabotaging our businesses. It's just really unbelievable. And then, his chief of staff, Reince Priebus. So, he's got a clean house. He's got to start firing people left and right. He has not done it yet. I think he's being too loyal to certain people. And yes, it's his wife's husband, but he's got to get rid of him. He's got to get rid of him. He's got to get rid of Reince Priebus. James Comey should have been fired literally the day Trump took over after the inauguration. I've heard from multiple sources that Comey was ordered by Loretta Lynch to destroy, the evidence that they got from the New York Police Department on Anthony Weiner's computer. It was also, during the Russia investigations from Congress, Comey, who's a, very good lawyer, he was playing word games up there to make sure he doesn't get in trouble. And the stuff he said about, Trump wasn't directly spied on. And then we find out, the details coming out about Susan Rice and Susan Rice's connections. She's been best friends with Obama. She's been worked with the Clinton administration for years. Her father worked at the Federal Reserve, and she's worked for a long time in different capacities with the Brookings Institute, which is this enormous think tank around the Washington, D.C. area, very hardcore Democrat, globalist think tank that has enormous amount of funding. I've heard Susan Rice is worth $50 million, and, supposedly on her taxes, that she only makes $175,000 a year as a government bureaucrat salary. So $50 million net worth on $175,000 a year salary. It's an enormous amount of cronyism. But the bottom line is, Sean, that, whether you think Trump's a neocon or not, or he did the Syria strikes, or he's moving troops into Jordan because, he wants to attack, or he was blackmailed, or whatever, is that, the effectiveness of his administration, not even 3 months in, is already being, put in quicksand or watered down. The swamp is literally winning right now. The only thing the Republicans and Democrats, unfortunately, can really agree on at this point is, foreign policy intervention, promoting the American empire with war and bombs and things like that. Almost all of Trump's domestic policy is basically being sabotaged from a combination of leaks and people with their different agendas. So it's going to be very difficult for Trump to get anything done in this environment. There's people willing to do almost anything to stop him. There's people, they probably won't go to prison. These Democrats at all different levels and bureaucrats who are leaking things, well, not all bureaucrats are Democrats, but there are a lot of people, literally from what I've heard, if there's copies of top secret material and folders and people are handed stuff, stuff is getting leaked. That in the past, when the Department of Justice would actually, prosecute people, that, no one would dare have leaked this stuff. No one would dare leak this stuff, and people just don't have any fear of prosecution. The Department of Justice is one of the government, all the government agencies, Sean, are really bad. Trump's not going to be able to shut them down or defund them, really. But the Department of Justice is one of the worst ones. What the Department of Justice has been able to get away with since Obama took office and put in enormously corrupt Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch has been really unbelievable, the amount of levels of crimes. Literally, did you hear about this, where billions of dollars in corporate fines from a lot of large corporations were literally being funneled by Holder and Lynch out the back door with Obama's blessing to, George Soros controlled social justice warrior, charities and political action committees. Yeah,
I hadn't heard that, but it doesn't surprise me a bit. I mean, there's treachery throughout the government, going all the way to the highest levels. And you mentioned Obama. There's a network. He's got a network working actively out of his new $5 million mansion there in D.C. I'm sure you know exactly where it is. A network that is really part of the deep state working against Trump. And so let me ask you this. So let's just concentrate on Syria for a second, because as we're having this conversation on Friday, it was just 6 days ago that Trump announced that they had hit Syria with 59 Tomahawk missiles. And of course, everyone is outraged by that from both all walks of life in America. You know, the people on the right, people on the left, nobody supports going to war with Syria. I say nobody carefully, but I mean literally. The American people are fed up with war. You remember when Obama tried to do this? I tweeted out, Obama tried to sell us a war in Syria. It didn't work, so now they gave us Trump. So let's just talk about the facts here. So what do you make of this government under Trump launching 59 Tomahawk missiles at an air base in Syria when the first person to come out and say, I support President Trump in striking Syria was Benjamin Netanyahu? And of course I tweeted, yeah, of course you do. More American treasure for Israeli wars. All right, so there's number one. That's a problem. And number two, today as we're having this conversation, Zero Hedge is reporting Syria accuses U.S. of hitting ISIS chemical weapons depot, killing hundreds. Russia sends drones. Let me ask you this. How is it possible that we are hitting ISIS chemical weapons depots in Syria when according to the United Nations, the United States, and the UK, we got all of the chemical weapons out of Syria in 2014? Is this not revisionist history? Right? The media tells us there's chemical weapons and the American people go, oh, there's chemical weapons. We got rid of all of them according to everybody, according to our own government in 2014, Jason.
This just proves the mainstream media lies, and you can't believe what they say. So I don't know exactly what to believe at this point. I do know that Trump gave Russia 2 hours warning to clear men out of the base. You know, of the 59 missiles that were fired, a large percentage of them missed their target.
Right.
So maybe this was somewhat intentional by Trump, where the deep state said, basically, you have to do this, and we'll back off, you know, the charges. My friend Lewis, this is one of his theories, that they worked out a deal with him that they would back off, you know, the Russia charges and stop going after as many people of his administration if he agreed to do something in Syria. So, you know, I don't think Trump wants World War III to initiate with Russia and Putin. He wouldn't have given him a 2-hour warning. So I think, you know, Trump is trying to walk a very fine line here. He may have made a deal. Trump is a deal maker. He may have made some type of deal. I did a short video on this on my channel a couple days ago asking listeners, you know, if they think that Trump is a warmongering neocon now, or if they think he was duped or tricked. And a lot of people think, you know, Trump might not have exactly known how the deep state works. But once he got into office in D.C., you know, he was quickly told basically like, you know, they're going to make his life miserable on this Russia stuff. And we know this from the WikiLeaks Podesta emails that Hillary and John Podesta, they were going to hammer home how Trump and Putin had a bromance going. And, you know, they've blown it out of proportion. I don't think General Flynn committed any crimes. I think, you know, he was just doing what a diplomat should have done. I think a lot of other diplomats and other administrations have done very similar stuff. But now there's a witch hunt going on that anything, you know, if you have Russian Trump has brought this up, and Sean Spicer has, that if you have Russian dressing on your salad, you know, people are gonna question that, you know, you're dealing with Russia. And then did you see that there was a fact check on Russian dressing and it's not really Russian? So, I mean, this stuff is ridiculous, Sean. It's becoming more and more difficult to know what is true and what is not true anymore. And so, you know, what's going on in Syria, I think it's too early to tell. But he is putting troops on the ground in Jordan. I've heard 150,000. I don't think Trump, that was his approval plan. It looks like once Bannon got moved off the National Security Council, Mike Cernovich is reporting this. He's saying that it was H.R. McMaster who wants 150,000 ground soldiers in Syria, and they're amassing in Jordan with tanks, and they're moving, you know, a lot of troops towards North Korea. The North Korean Kim Jong-un, I mean, that dude is crazy, and he has nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, they're preparing
you know,
a test apparently this weekend. Probably by the time this broadcast airs, we'll know whether or not that nuclear test occurred. It's supposedly happening on Saturday, which is when I'll try to release this this interview. You know, I think what's clear to all of us now is that old Bill Hicks joke about the deep state is actually probably true. Bill Hicks once joked that it must be a nightmare to become president, right? Because you go in with all these good intentions. Of course, that's probably not true with people like Bill Clinton or Hillary Clinton or Bush Sr. But, you know, back in the day, take JFK, for instance. But you get elected, and then you're invited down an elevator below the White House, many, many levels, into a room that you didn't even know existed. And you walk in, and it's surrounded by all these oligarch corporate heads, all smoking cigars in this smoke-filled room. And a screen, a movie screen, a TV screen slowly lowers.
And a big guy in a cigar, roll the film. And it's a shot of a Kennedy assassination from an angle you've never seen before. that looks suspiciously off the grassy knoll. And then the screen goes up and the lights come up and they go to the new president. Any questions?
The new president says, only what my agenda is. What do you want me to do? So, I mean, I think we can see that really, though, in real life playing out with this deep state aligned, the deep state and its weaponized media aligned against Trump, right? They are just not going to relent. They are just going to continue to try to drag him down. If they could impeach him, they would.
Yes. The goal is there's multiple goals here, obviously, with Trump. They're trying to declaw him now to basically take all of his political capital out. They're lying to a certain extent about what he's doing in the polls because depending upon which poll you look at, people are pretty optimistic that he's getting some things done. But, you know, all the mainstream polls are saying his approval rating is 30%, almost at 30% already and falling. So It's a difficult thing for Trump. What I would say, though, is that Trump's a deal maker. So a lot of people think that, you know, if Trump's approval ratings actually do fall and Trump caves, he will agree to do some deals with the deep state, with the globalists, in order to get some of his, domestic agenda done. And that brings us to the strong dollar. And, Trump ran on a platform talking bad things about the Federal Reserve, saying they manipulate interest rates, saying that they created all kinds of asset bubbles. And here he is. He doesn't want a strong dollar. He wants to talk the dollar down, which is based off mercantilism, which was a precursor hundreds of years before even Keynesian economics. And what mercantilism says is that you need a weak currency in order to increase exports. But the problem is you have so many different countries who all want a weak currency to boost exports. So it's basically a zero-sum game with trade. Then you get countries that are willing to go into the currency markets with their central bank or their treasury department and spend a lot of money of their foreign exchange reserves manipulating interest rates. This happens literally on a daily basis across the board. The currency markets, about $5 trillion in currency, Sean, are traded a day. A lot of that trading is central bank and treasury manipulation of exchange rates doing so. And, then you have, in addition to currency manipulation with all different countries, and it's not, Trump says China is a currency manipulator. The U.S. does it too. I mean, every government is trying to. No one wants a strong currency. Everyone wants a weak currency. That's because if you have a lot of debt and you have a lot of liabilities, it makes it a lot easier to manage so you can pay back the liabilities you owe. Like the U.S. has tons and tons of unfunded liabilities. It's a lot easier to pay it back in cheaper and cheaper dollars. You have to manipulate the gold and silver price. You have to fake the government statistics like GDP and unemployment rate and CPI. You have to fake those things as well. This all fits in together. The other thing about the countries with the weak currency manipulation is then you start having, tariffs. And this starts to get really dangerous if you study history. You start to get to trade wars and then resource wars where countries can withhold exports of certain key natural resources. And then you get, if countries' economies get weak enough, you get to real actual physical wars if countries' economies collapse. So history is replete with many examples of that. Trump has been talking about a 15 to 20% VAT tax. It's called a border adjustment tax, but there might also be other additional VAT taxes on imported goods for a bunch of them to try to encourage more U.S. manufacturing. The problem is now with artificially cheap capital that you have is that a lot of investment is being made into touchscreens and automation and robotics. So there will be some jobs brought back. There will be high-paying jobs, but there will not be as many jobs as Trump thinks he can get because capital is still so artificially cheap thanks to global central banks. So I think ultimately this is going to lead, no matter what Trump is able to accomplish or not, because the Federal Reserve, I think, is basically on its own agenda at this point. I interviewed Danielle DiMartino Booth, who wrote a book called Fed Up. She worked at the Dallas Federal Reserve Board for about 9 years. She didn't have a PhD in economics. She actually worked on Wall Street, and I actually got her to admit on my interview over a month ago that basically the Federal Reserve should be audited and we should work on a plan to limit its powers if they're going to keep doing all these crazy things, which is not what she said in the book. She said the Fed should not be audited. They need all this power, but I got her to basically flip on that. But she says that the Federal Reserve is being hardcore politicized and weaponized now. And she says that the Federal Reserve will do as many interest rate increases as it takes in 2017 and 18 to crash asset prices, the stock market, and other asset markets, to crash them so Trump can be blamed, and so the Republicans in Congress can be blamed, and so the Democrats then can take back control of Congress in the 2018 political elections. Yeah. So I'm not sure I fully agree with her on that. I think the Federal Reserve is going to try to increase interest rates at least one more time in 2017. But if they were to say increase interest rates 4 times, even if they're 25 basis point interest rate increases for the rest of the year, something could eventually break and they may panic and revert back to QE. So it's tough to tell what could happen. But if they do that, if asset prices do crash and the Federal Reserve keeps increasing interest rates, the market is obviously wanting interest rates higher because the bond markets have moved. So the Fed is behind the curve and following what the market wants to a certain extent. But if they actually do increase interest rates and crash asset markets, under Obama, they weren't willing to do that. They wanted asset markets high because they wanted to give Hillary Clinton the best shot to get elected. But now that Trump's in charge, they definitely, since there's so many Democrats at the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen is a very hardcore Democrat. I think almost all the PhD economists at the Federal Reserve are hardcore Democrats. Even Ben Bernanke was a Republican, and due to all the groupthink and all the pressure from all the people around him, he basically had to de-affiliate himself because of his colleagues. So there's just enormous amount of hubris and groupthink and herd mentality and drastic overconfidence at the Federal Reserve. And, we're setting up, I know you talk about The Economist magazine cover a lot.
Oh, I was going to bring that up because, we're only 6 months away from 2018. So we could definitely revisit that, as it relates to $20 trillion in debt. And, Trump's hands are tied by the deep state, and his hands are tied by the central bank, and his hands are tied by a corrupt government, and his hands are tied. So his hands are tied at every turn. And one of the things I wanted to ask you here before I lose you is, as it relates to the economy, just generally speaking, right? So instead of just geopolitically, the macroeconomics, let's talk about the microeconomy of the U.S. government. Let's talk about the economy in the United States. Trump says that he wants to cut taxes on small businesses down to 20%. That would be a huge boon to the economy. It would be a huge boon to families. I think it would be a boon to the economy in general, and it could actually result in more tax receipts for the government. Mm-hmm. But he's going to have to cut taxes, which means, on the face of it, lower tax receipts in the near term. What are the chances, do you think, that he can push that through? We saw what they did to him on Obamacare. Are they going to allow him to cut taxes to 20% for small businesses?
It would take at least 2 or 3 years probably to get that through, and there would have to be a lot of other trade-offs done. So the lobbyists and the Democrats, he would have to give them concessions in order to get people to swing vote. And, by the time, normally what happens here in D.C. is by the time a bill gets passed, whether it's Ron Paul's audit the Fed bill, that he was able to get a one-time partial audit of the Fed, or so many other bills, the bills just get watered down, and there's a bunch of weird things by lobbyists that are stuck into bills that have no business being put there. So yeah, we might eventually get something like that. The problem now, Sean, is that the finances of the U.S. government are so tight. So if interest rates were to go up a couple percentage points, not basis points, but go up, say, to 3 or 4%, the amount of annual tax revenues that would need to be paid to service interest payments on the debt would be absolutely massive. They would take a huge chunk, 40% or so. I don't have the math right in front of me, but about 40% of all the annual tax revenues would go just to interest payments on the debt. Yeah. So, that would be unmanageable. What I have heard is that if Trump gets his tax cuts like that on corporations, the consumers then, not only does Trump want a weaker dollar and, more inflation, but they would also be looking at, increased taxes elsewhere to make up for that. So there may be more jobs created with more investments from corporations into the United States with lower corporate taxes. But because things are so dire with the government's finances that, no one will really talk about in public, I've heard the Congressional Budget Office is recommending now, with a lot of, whether it's Paul Ryan's tax plan or Trump's tax plan, they want, VAT taxes, value adjustment taxes. So they want a 15 to 20% VAT tax and online national sales tax. And we're seeing states that are starting to increase taxes across the board as well. California just put on a very large oil and gasoline tax. I have listeners in New Jersey telling me in order to sell if you're trying to retire and leave the state to cut your cost of living, there's a huge exit tax on the state when you sell your house now. So these states are coming up because there's huge shortfalls. Normally, most of the states, Sean, are Democratic states. So they're your California, Michigan, New York, New Jersey, Illinois. Those are the states in the worst trouble right now at first. Although, there's big pension plan crises that are also coming as well that are drastically underfunded. So I think in the real economy, Sean, even if there is tax cuts, we're going to see with weaker currencies, we're going to see a lot worse stagflation going forward, and we're going to see an increase in inflation and taxes. Unfortunately, Sean, the government statistics probably won't reflect much of any of this, but on Main Street, when I eat at this Japanese ramen noodle place about once a month now, and in the last couple months, I go there with my best friend, and the last couple months, they've kept the menu price the same, and the amount of portion is down 20 or 30%.
Yeah.
And I used to go to eat at this Taco Tuesday place, and basically they used to have all tacos for about $1.50, and then it went to $1.95, and then they removed Taco Tuesday, and it used to be 3 tacos on the regular menu for $7.95. 3 tacos. Now it's 2 tacos for the same price. So, and I don't eat there anymore because they can't control their costs, and it's just going up like crazy. It's just not worth it. So this is what we're seeing now. And, the other thing is on the real economy, Sean, in the next couple months, 3,500 retail stores are closing.
Right.
So you can't say this is all because of Amazon and e-commerce. Okay, maybe it's playing a part. Maybe there's a decent percentage of that chunk because Amazon and e-commerce are able to have warehouses and sell you goods at razor-thin margins and put retail out of business. But, these retail companies, they have websites too, and they can have sales. So they wouldn't be completely going out of business. What this tells to me is that the the middle class is being destroyed. It's accelerating. Stagflation is increasing. Inflationary expectations from people on Main Street business owners are starting to increase. The Federal Reserve had a beige book last month that said when they do these interviews with business owners that inflationary expectations are starting to accelerate. So I would say pretty much no matter what Trump's able to get done or not, the die has already been cast because of past administrations, past spending from central banks, and the solutions that the central bankers did to pretend that there was a recovery after 2008 when it was really just a reflation of asset prices to ridiculous valuations and a desperate attempt to maintain the status quo at any and all costs is, we're going to see a lot worse stagflation now globally.
Well, you know what? I'm going to give you an anecdote myself just to back you up on the fact that the middle class is being strangled. I like your taco story, but this one is about the association that we have in our neighborhood. We live in a relatively nice neighborhood, and we have an association fee, right? So if you want to paint your house some wacky yellow color, that's going to turn everybody off and lower property values, the association probably wouldn't approve that. So if you want to do any major changes to your lot or your home, you need to go to the association for approval. It's nice to have an association. They plant nice flowers and they make the neighborhood look pretty every year. But every year since we've lived here, since we built our house in 2004, the association fee has gone up annually, roughly 10 to 11%. Every single year, year over year over, it's just getting out of hand. And I think it's fascinating because it's the same thing these governments are doing to us with property taxes and with everything else. They continue to get their pound of flesh as the average family does not enjoy 10% salary increases every year. And it's getting to the point where I want to march down to one of these association meetings and ask these people what in the hell it is they think they're doing. Because, again, when is the last time you and your wife got a 10% salary increase 5 years in a row? It just doesn't happen. So we're all being strangled by, these bureaucrats. As we round out this discussion in the last couple of minutes, you brought it up, so I'm going to come back to it. What is the end game for the dollar? Are the Rothschilds going to be right, and in 2018 we're going to see this thing crumble altogether? Or will it continue to be stitched together with, just raising the debt limit once again, the debt ceiling once again? My understanding is they can. So how does this all end? What's the end game, Jason?
So China is setting up a lot of currency swaps right now with their trading partners. They have over 30 of them. Their currency swap lines are only for about 5 billion to 10 billion each. They're not massive. So they're nowhere near the amounts of trade in dollars and currency swaps that the U.S. has set up with a lot of their other partners. So they realize that this system is dying, and they're trying to set up another system as quickly as they can. It's very difficult to give an exact timeline on that, but I would think that it's almost guaranteed that we're going to have another global financial crisis in the next 2 or 3 years, and that's just because there's so many financial landmines in this global economy. The global economy now, Sean, is one giant economic minefield, okay? Whether it's pension fund crisis, China needing to bail out their banks, and municipalities with over $1 trillion and potentially devaluing their currency, again, causing massive amounts of capital. Every time China threatens to do another currency devaluation, you're going to see the price of Bitcoin go up. You're going to see a lot of Chinese take money out of the country and go buy more real estate, not caring whatever price they pay for the real estate just because they don't want their currency devalued and their savings devalued. You're going to see physical demand for physical gold and silver go up. I think, everyone's trying to devalue their currency. It's not just the dollar, Sean. So, holding any fiat currency long term, you're going to lose. You should still, I think right now, people should have some Bitcoin. They should have some physical gold and silver, and they should have some cash, maybe US dollars. But the cash and the dollars should only be for maybe paying your bills and emergencies, and then also as a reserve fund in case we have a major crash in asset prices, so you have cash to deploy to go buy assets cheap. So the next time these central bankers get desperate and try to coordinate another bailout plan, and you benefit from a temporary reflation of asset prices, you can maybe make get really rich quick off their reflation of the asset prices. So I think they're going to keep doing this on and on. There's obviously your listener, Sean, are woken up and they understand more than most Americans and people all over the globe what's really going on. But there's still a large chunk of Americans that believe in the mainstream media, that believe there's not nearly as much corruption in the U.S. government. I mean, as I've heard, the stories that I've heard from people in different government agencies that I've spoken to off the record, middle management people and people on the ground, of stories of corruption, of government contractors in the military-industrial complex, literally stealing $50 million or more, and people making $200,000 a year as a military contractor and bragging they don't have to show up to work. If you tell this to a Democratic person who reads the New York Times or the Washington Post, watches CNN or MSNBC, you tell them all these stories of corruption, they'll tell you you're lying. It's an ideology to them. So that they believe in big government, and that the dutiful bureaucrat like Wesley Mouch, who's willing to do the right thing for the greater good, they're willing to ignore all these stories of corruption. But make no mistake, man, this thing has been in motion for a very, very long time. The corruption started literally over 100 years ago, but it accelerated with the creation of the Federal Reserve and the income tax. And Woodrow Wilson was one of the worst presidents in U.S. history because he allowed the Federal Reserve, he started the permanent income tax, and he, tried to get the League of Nations passed, which was a precursor to the United Nations. He was a hardcore globalist, and he started rapidly setting up the progressive state, although Teddy Roosevelt did start setting up a lot of government agencies too. But this has been accelerating for 100 years with cultural Marxism and Antonio Gramsci. And, when you do something for 100 years, it compounds and compounds and compounds to the point where, basically it's gotten to the point where the next 2 or 3 years we're going to have another crisis, and no one knows exactly what's going to happen, except the one thing I'm sure of, Sean, is that people in power are going to change the rules and try to screw us as much as possible. So if you have, some assets and you have, like I said, cash, Bitcoin, physical gold and silver, you're going to at least have some options to be somewhat prepared. But I think, food prices are going to keep going a lot higher. And, unfortunately, Sean, with these higher food prices, it's a lot harder to find nutritional food. So just because food prices are going up doesn't mean that the the quality of the food is going up. So a lot of the food has not been very good, and yet the price on it's still going up.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very difficult for people just to survive. I hear that from my listeners out there. And then you have, what the mainstream media is doing with the censorship.
Yeah.
Which I think, what they've done with the educational system and what the mainstream media have done is probably the most deplorable of anything.
Yeah, well, no, it really is. And they've deliberately gone out of their way to try to create this fake news meme in order to make the field no longer level. There's no level playing field for those of us in the truth media because Google is changing their analytics, YouTube is changing their monetization policies. It's an attack not only on free speech, it's an attack on free critical thinking because they don't want challenging topics like what we've just been discussing here discussed. They don't want the sheeple waking up. They want the sheeple willing to be sheared, just like good little sheep, because you're right, when this thing collapses, they're just going to turn up the heat. They're going to come after, it's going to be bail-ins. It's going to be bail-ins on steroids. You got a savings account, we need it to run the government. You got a pension, we need it to run the government. It's just, these Agenda 2030 policies, if they continue to be allowed to roll out, they're going to turn us all into 13th century serfs by design, and that's a topic for another day. Jason, you do great work. Can you tell people about your website and how they can subscribe to you on YouTube?
Sure. Well, my YouTube channel is being heavily censored right now, so we only have 14,000 subscribers and 2.6 million views. We should be a lot larger than that. We were growing at an unbelievable pace last year, but we've been kneecapped to the point since September 2016 where basically almost all the growth has stopped. And they've stolen over $7,000 in ad revenue from me too, in annualized revenue. So I think your listeners then should sign up for my email address. They can go to WallStForMainST, WallStForMainST.com, and get our email address because now that what's happening with us on YouTube, I know I saw your video last week about how they took your ad revenues down more than 95%.
Yep.
We're going to need backup plans. I'm hoping there will be an entrepreneur brave enough to go and make a limited censorship video upload website that's similar to YouTube, where we can go and sell ad revenue or get paid for content, maybe get tipped in Bitcoin or some other type of cryptocurrency and make a living doing this. But YouTube's just totally, they're full globalist. A lot of the competition, like Vimeo, I heard they're friends with Hillary Clinton, so there's not a lot of options right now besides putting the content on your own website.
Yeah, no, it's very tough out there. It's a changing environment, but fortunately, we're all keeping our chin up, and we're not going to let them shut us down. Boy, we're sure going to go out kicking and screaming if they do try to shut us down. And there's just good people. There's too many of us. There's too many good, like-minded people out there that just want liberty. Is it that damn hard to have liberty in the United States of America? I don't think it should be impossible, folks. It's just going to require that all of us stand up and scream bloody murder together, because as I once made a video when Google shut down Mike Adams and Natural News for 6 or 7 days, and then they came for me. So if we don't stand up for one of us, they're going to come after all of us. Our guest has been Jason Burack from Wall Street for Main Street. Check his YouTube channel out and do subscribe. Jason, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, and guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We very, very much appreciate your support. Check us out for real news 24/7 at sgtreport.com. Check me out on Twitter at sgtreport. And do subscribe to the YouTube channel of the same name, SGT Report. Have a wonderful week ahead. God bless.
That is part of the New World Order agenda. Their attack on Christianity includes trying to convince people scientifically that God doesn't exist. And as you mentioned, that's actually been the #1 watched interview, the one we did on SGT Report. And I've had emails from around the world of people who told me they came to faith as a result of that interview you and I did. We went over the evidence for a designer and against the idea that we came about by chance.